There used to be more than 4,000 drive-in movie theaters in the United States. Most of them are gone now. Not abandoned in some dramatic way, just quietly closed. Torn down. Turned into something else. If you drove past one today, you might not even notice what it used to be. A storage facility, a flea market, an empty lot with a chain-link fence. The big screen, if it's still standing, doesn't look like much in daylight. For a few decades, though, this was how a lot of Americans watched movies. Not in a theater with rows of seats and a projectionist in a booth upstairs, but outside, in a car, with the sound coming through a speaker you hung on the window. It wasn't considered strange. It was just another option, sometimes the better option. The first drive-ins appeared in the early 1930s, but they didn't really take off until after World War II. That's when a few things came together all at once. Americans were buying cars in huge numbers. Suburbs were spreading out. Families had a little more money and a little more free time. And going to the movies was still one of the main things people did for entertainment. But indoor theaters had rules. You had to sit still, be quiet, dress a certain way. If you had young kids, you either paid for a babysitter or you stayed home. The drive-in solved that problem. You could bring the whole family. The kids could fall asleep in the back seat. You could talk during the movie if you wanted. Eat your own food. Smoke. It didn't matter. It was informal, casual. You didn't have to worry about bothering anyone because everyone was in their own car. And it was cheap. One price per car, not per person. That made it affordable for families, for teenagers on a date, for anyone who wanted to see a movie without spending much. The design was simple. A big open lot, a massive screen at one end, rows of speaker posts, a small building in the middle with a projection booth, a concession stand, and bathrooms. That was it. Some of them added playgrounds near the screen so kids could run around before the movie started. A few had miniature golf or small rides, but most of them stayed basic. The appeal wasn't the amenities, it was the experience. By the late 1950s, drive-ins were everywhere. Small towns, big cities, highways. They were part of the landscape. You'd see them from the road at night glowing, hundreds of cars facing the same direction. It felt new, even though the idea was pretty straightforward. It was movies, but outside. Movies, but in your car. That combination just worked. The decline didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single year when drive-ins suddenly became obsolete. It was more like a slow leak. One of the first problems was land. Drive-ins took up a lot of space, several acres usually. In the 50s and 60s, that wasn't a big deal. Land on the edge of town was cheap. But as suburbs expanded, that land became valuable. Developers wanted it for housing, shopping centers, office parks. The drive-in might have been profitable, but selling the land was often more profitable. Property taxes went up, maintenance costs went up, and drive-ins only operated part of the year in most places. In the winter, in the north, they were just empty lots. That made them harder to sustain. Then the movies themselves changed. In the 80s and 90s, studios started putting more emphasis on opening weekends, big releases, blockbusters. They wanted movies in as many theaters as possible right away. Drive-ins couldn't compete with that. They usually showed older films, second-run movies, or double features. That worked when people were patient, when they didn't mind waiting a few weeks to see something. But as home video became common, that window closed. If you could rent a movie a few months after it came out, why drive to a field to watch it on a screen half a mile away? The sound system was another issue. For decades, drive-ins used individual speakers. You pulled up to a post, grabbed the speaker, and hung it on your car window. It worked, but the sound quality was poor, tinny, muffled. The speakers broke all the time. In the 80s, some drive-ins switched to FM radio transmission. You'd tune your car radio to a specific station, and the audio would come through your speakers. It was better, but it also drained your car battery if you weren't careful. And it still didn't match the experience of a modern indoor theater with surround sound. Multiplexes were spreading by then. 8 screens, 10 screens, 16 screens. All in one building, climate-controlled, comfortable seats, advanced sound. They could show the newest movies at multiple times throughout the day. The drive-in, by comparison, could only show 1 or 2 movies a night, and only when it was dark. It started to feel inefficient, inconvenient even, especially if the weather was bad. There were other small factors too. Crime went up in some areas, and sitting in a dark parking lot felt less safe than it used to. Gas prices rose in the 70s, and people became more conscious of driving long distances for entertainment. None of these things killed the drive-in on its own, but together they added up. One by one they closed. Some were demolished right away. Others sat empty for years. Weeds grew through the pavement. The screen weathered and peeled. Eventually, someone bought the land and built something else. What replaced the drive-in wasn't really another place. It was a shift in how people watched movies. The multiplex became the default, convenient, predictable. You didn't have to check the weather or worry about your car battery. You just bought a ticket and sat down. But even more than that, home video changed things. VHS tapes, DVDs streaming. The ability to watch a movie whenever you wanted in your own house made the whole idea of going somewhere to see a film feel less necessary. The drive-in had offered something specific, a way to watch movies with privacy and flexibility. You controlled your space. You didn't have to follow someone else's rules. Home video offered the same thing, but without leaving the house. The drive-in also used to be one of the few cheap entertainment options for families. But as ticket prices at indoor theaters stayed relatively stable and home entertainment got cheaper, that advantage faded. Drive-ins didn't disappear completely. A few hundred are still operating. Some of them have been around since the 50s. Others reopened after being closed for years. A handful of new ones were built, mostly as novelty attractions. They survive in places where land is cheap and the community supports them, where there's enough nostalgia or curiosity to keep them going, but they're not part of the everyday landscape anymore. You have to seek them out now, plan for them. They're destinations, not defaults. It didn't collapse. It didn't fail. It just slowly stopped fitting into the way people lived. The drive-in worked because of a specific moment, when cars were central to American life, when families needed informal, affordable entertainment, when there weren't many other options. As those conditions changed, the drive-in didn't. It stayed the same while everything around it shifted. And eventually, that was enough. Most of the big screens are gone now, torn down or left to rot. The lots are covered with buildings or pavement or grass, but every now and then, you'll see one. Usually from the highway. A faded screen standing in an empty field. You might not recognize it at first. It just looks like a wall, a relic. And then you realize what it was, what it used to mean on a Friday night in July. It didn't disappear all at once. It just slowly stopped being necessary.